Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. The world teeters on the edge of global conflagration. The mad dog imperialists have taken control of the Obama White House. But at the same time, Britain's finest hour yesterday evening, the British House of Commons voted by a majority of 13 votes to repudiate the warmongers Cameron and Haig. Britain will not be taking part, as the New York Daily News headlines today. The British are not, repeat, not coming. No attack by London. So we have a situation where Obama has lost the support of the special relationship, lost the support of Great Britain. He has lost the control that the U.S. has normally exercised over Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Obama has no hope of getting a resolution through the UN Security Council. We have Russia sending 2 significant warships, an anti-submarine vessel and the guided missile cruiser Moskva, to the waters of the Levant near Tartus. China, the Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called for restraint and repeated that only the UN Security Council can decide Chapter 7 measures. It's not a do-it-yourself kit for the aggressors in the White House, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Chinese media saying that the U.S. wants to posture as the judge, jury, and executioner, and that is rejected by the Chinese. So Obama has no British special relation, no control over Ban Ki-moon, no possibility of getting anything through the UN Security Council, no support from the Arab League. The Arab League, of course, is happy to condemn Assad, but they refuse pointedly to endorse a military attack on Syria. And at the same time, Obama is now getting an increasing backlash from the Congress. And the reactionaries are finally doing something momentarily good for world history. But watch out for those reactionaries. As we speak, there is a meeting of the National Security Council going on. It's 1 p.m. on the afternoon of Friday, August 30th. National Security Council meeting under the chairmanship of the Viper, Susan Rice. Susan Rice and John Kerry, whose wretched, bungling, incompetent advice have led Obama into this situation. He needs to fire Rice, Kerry, loopy Samantha Power, Jimmy Liar Clapper, and the rendition and torture expert Brennan, as well as Sequoia Hagel. Fire this incompetent, bungling group. They are way over their heads, and if he doesn't fire them, these, I think, are the obvious targets for impeachment. So once we've said impeachment, let's look at this situation. We have, first of all, a group of 54 Democrats, typically led by Barbara Lee. They want Obama to come to the Congress for a debate and a vote before any armed action against Syria. Now, this is a limited form of opposition. There is, however, at the same time, a group of 140 congressmen led by Scott Rigel of Virginia. 140 congressmen, 150 perhaps by now, 20 Democrats plus. They point out that the attack is unconstitutional without a vote in Congress. And I would say that at this point, if Obama presses ahead with a solo attack, now that the British Parliament has repudiated this lunatic adventure, Obama is virtually guaranteed to face impeachment. However, this is an arm's-length proposition from yours truly. That is to say, this is simply a statement of fact. Obama, if you insist on attacking, the reactionary Republicans and fascisto Republicans will try to impeach you. They'll be happy to try to do that once you've destroyed your own base of support, which is heavily pacifistic, once you've negated the entire rationale of your political existence, which supposedly goes back to that famous October 2002 speech in Chicago where you opposed the Iraq War, we're told. There is no tape. Obama, this is simply a fact. I'm not saying that I support it. I'm simply saying this is what will happen. And, of course, once that impeachment effort it starts off, all the scum of the earth will be attracted into the impeachment coalition. We'll have neocons, we'll have neo-Confederates, we'll have racists, we'll have warmongers, we'll have white supremacists, we'll have the entire crew. There is no question of making common cause with that gang. And, of course, what will they do? Suppose they decide to impeach Obama and Biden, because Biden is now out on a limb himself demanding the attack. Then we'd have President Boehner. Would we be better with President Boehner? Would we have been better with President Romney? With President Romney, this attack would have occurred long ago. So the answer there is no. We are not in the business of trying to put the Republican Party in power. We are in the business of trying to put ourselves in power. We want to carve out a piece of power. And the strategy, I would suggest, goes back to what Lenin enunciated at the Zimmerwald conference in Switzerland in 1915, almost 100 years ago. And my variation on that is, turn the imperialist war into a revolutionary mass strike and contend for power based on that, not making common cause with the little weasel Rand Paul or Boehner or any of these other characters who are interested in power for themselves. No, turn the imperialist war into a revolutionary mass strike. And, of course, what the fast food workers are doing and other labor struggles, these are the things that we want to join into. And, of course, the Credico campaign, the Tax Wall Street campaign. We'll get a report from New York City a little bit later in the show that the Tax Wall Street Party, against all odds with superhuman effort, has succeeded in putting the Tax Wall Street Party on the New York City mayoral ballot for November 5th with Randy Credico as candidate. Credico at this point is the only anti-war candidate because all the other Democrats are cringing. They don't dare contradict Obama, the Messiah. No, they don't want to do that. But Credico, I think, has the courage of his convictions. So here we are. It's the 30th of August. The National Security Council meeting is going on. We're going to hear from Bones Kerry in about half an hour. We'll try to reflect that if we can. And, well, the predictions that we've heard coming from a number of sources, Andrea Mitchell says the attack on Syria will occur on Monday, and that will make it September 1st, 2013, the anniversary of the unleashing of World War II, with the Nazi attack on Poland, and some of the methods being used by the Nazis to set up that war with Poland, I think, are being imitated in Syria by the rebels, by the opposition. And we want to remind everybody, September 24th in the evening here in Washington, D.C., to assert the cause of U.S.-Russian friendship, which has meant so much to the world. There will be a commemoration of the Russian fleets in New York and San Francisco. More about that later in the program. And back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. It's the 30th of August. We're on the brink of general war in the Middle East and a possible world conflagration. But there's a fighting chance to stop this. And all those scribblers who write articles, we can have 12 signs that this war has already been decided. That's an excuse to do nothing and sit on your duff. That's contemptible. That's pathetic. I guess that appeals to libertarians because they like to sit around complaining and never do anything. They never offer alternatives, and they never fight to try to change it by taking some power of their own. Anarchists, same story, right? Left-wing and right-wing anarchists, they don't want to take power. It's always going to be somebody else. So, National Security Council meeting going on. Statement by Bones Kerry is expected. And today we're going to get the White House Syrian gas dossier, or better yet, the CIA State Department Syrian gas dossier. It's based on the handiwork of the British Joint Intelligence, the JIP, anyway, the Joint Intelligence body that they have. And, of course, has it been sexed up? Can Assad strike in 45 minutes? Have any scientists been found dead sitting under a tree? And so forth, right? What else is going to be in this thing? The whole thing is doctored. The Mossad 8200 committee. We're told there are going to be intercepts. The Mossad has an entity called the Bureau 8200 or something like this. They claim that they've got intercepts of top Syrian officials and others, maybe including Moher Assad. Well, we don't trust fabrications, falsifications, and frauds coming from the Mossad, right? We don't need to have an interested party leading us around by the nose. The Mossad has the same interest as the Syrian terrorist rebels. We're also told that the impact site has been doctored and degraded by military attack. Well, Colonel Wilkerson, the former aide to Colin Powell, says that's absolutely preposterous because the tissue samples and biological evidence is not degraded in any way by those things. And we've got Bandar implicated. This is an interesting story. We have an article written by a former Associated Press reporter, and this was posted on the Internet. If you go to my Twitter feed at Webster G. Tarpley, which, of course, has to be your constant guide. Yesterday, the Thursday, 29th of August, was one of the biggest Twitter days in recent memory. But this was a story posted on something called Mint Press News, mintpressnews.com. And that is now shut down. It looks like there's been a cyber attack by the CIA or the NSA or the Mossad or the DGSE, somebody like this, or the Saudis. You can't find it there anymore. Fortunately, Press TV of Iran has a summary, which you can find there. And the idea is that a Saudi militant in the Ghouta area, somebody notoriously linked to Prince Bandar. Prince Bandar, of course, is now the intelligence boss, the spy master, the covert operations czar of the kingdom. And this Saudi militant, this jihadi operating in that area of the western suburbs or eastern suburbs of Damascus, he began bringing in tubes and large bottles that were stored in a cave by very amateurish personnel, and at some point, the poison gas fumes began to rise, and lots of people got killed. So there's every reason to think that Bandar is the mastermind of this entire thing, with the Israelis working together. We're also told that some of these bodies that were shown come from elsewhere. Hey, that's a good anniversary. Remember Operation Canned Goods, set up by Goebbels and Himmler and such people. The Gleiwitz radio station of 30th to 31st of August, 1939. Remember, Nazi operatives took German criminals from prisons, dressed them in Polish uniforms, shot them, and then displayed the bodies around the Gleiwitz radio station. They pretended that the Polish army had taken over the station. This was used as a proof of a Polish attack, right? And Hitler then says, since 5:30 in the morning, we've been shooting back, and bomb has been answered with bomb. And that's the Second World War. We're too close to comfort. for that right now. If the Israelis bomb a Russian military shipment, or if the Israelis start shooting at one of those Russian vessels, that's when the missiles could begin to fly. Time to back off, back down. And that goes for you, Obama. You're so conflicted. Stay conflicted. You claim you haven't made a decision. Don't make one. So it's the anniversary, the 74th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II. All right, now let's look at the British. It's their finest hour, not any other time. This is it. Cameron and Haig, two Colonel Blimps, two Tory arrogant imperialists, and their little lapdog Clegg, the pathetic Clegg of the Liberal Democrats, tagging along, dragged along like the tail on the Tory kite. They come in, they want to have a vote in the House of Commons yesterday, Thursday, 29th of August, an immediate vote for war. But they failed to reckon with the ghost of Tony Blair, Tony Blair's ghost, Alistair Campbell's ghost, right? The monstrous fabrications of 10 years ago that dragged the British into the lunatic Iraq war. So we have the Labour leader, Miliband. Now, let me hasten to add, this guy Miliband is somewhat snake-like himself. We cannot trust him because he has carefully left the door open for military attack later on. I think Miliband says, well, we'll let Obama go ahead and attack, and then we'll join in, right? That will change the dynamic. Maybe not Miliband. But Miliband wanted this for himself, right? He'd been ridiculed by Cameron. He was weak. Now he can say, look at me, I'm a tough guy. I forced Cameron and Haig to back down. So the resolution failed by 13 votes. It means that significant number of Tory, conservative members of Parliament, the backbench, defected. Significant numbers, slightly smaller numbers of Liberal Democrat people have, members of Parliament have also defected. And you had the various Scottish National Party, the Respect Party with our friend George Galloway, and the Welsh National Party, the Plaid Cymru, and so forth. They're all against the war. Some of them much more against the war than Miliband. And Miliband is going to have a hard time trying to turn that around at this point. So this hits Obama harder than anything. The mother of Parliament has voted no to Obama's lunatic plan. Now, in the middle of it, there is this thing called Crown Prerogative, which I guess we'll have to discuss in just a minute when we come back on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. That article about Bandar being behind the poison gas by Dale Gavlak, who has been a stringer for the Associated Press, the BBC, National Public Radio, and Yahya Abaneh, filed on the 29th of August. And the story is that a Saudi militant, the guy's known as Abu Aisha, a victim, the father of a victim said his son and 12 other rebels had been killed inside of a tunnel used to store weapons provided by a Saudi militant known as Abu Aisha, who was leading a fighting battalion. The father described the weapons as having a tube-like structure. Others were a huge gas bottle. For this and other things, take a look at Webster G. Tarpley feed on Twitter. You got a lot of links there. We've still got this text, even though it's been taken down on the Mint website. All right, so the British. Now, notice at the end, though, Miliband had to specifically ask Cameron, are you going to go ahead and completely make this vote into a joke by attacking anyway with the help of the Queen using Crown Prerogative? So Cameron has said, no, I won't use Crown Prerogative. His government is about to fall. This guy Haig should be fired, and he should be then banished by the Queen to an echo chamber where he'd have to listen to his own voice for all eternity, which is obviously his favorite pastime, but that would turn pretty boring pretty soon. This hits Obama very hard. It's also interesting, the British Constitution, since the British have no distinction between constitutional law and statute law, This changes the British Constitution, makes it harder to go to war in the future. An interesting fact. But the main thing is this hits Obama very hard, cuts Obama off at the knees, I would say. Now, this leaves the French. That is to say, Hollande and Fabius. Hollande, of course, is the classic wag the dog in this situation. The popularity of Hollande has plummeted to the 20% to 25% level. His absolute impotence, his inability to roll back austerity, to provide jobs, to get France out of this depression, that's what he's trying to counter. He's really trying to change the subject from his own domestic failure. And then we have Fabius, obviously bound very closely to the Israelis. He's the head of the French Foreign Ministry, the Quai d'Orsay. So Fabius is known as le laquais du Quai. He's the lackey of the Quai. That is the key, the Quai d'Orsay. So he is a leading warmonger in this. Now, here's the problem that they have. The vote in the French National Assembly is scheduled for September 4th. If Andrea Mitchell is right, the attack will already occur on September 1st. Others are actually speculating the attack may occur at any point right now. It could happen at any moment. What will the French National Assembly do if they are completely scorned, right? If they're made into a useless, irrelevant rubber stamp? Won't they at least bring down the French Prime Minister Ayrault, some appointee of this Hollande? Hollande now says the attack can occur as early as Wednesday. Does that mean before the vote or after the vote? There's also an eagerness here to take the place of the British, that is, to surpass the British in groveling and propitiating the United States. Back in the 80s, in the Italian press, you'd often see this expression, I Bulgari della NATO, that is, the Bulgarians were always thought to be the most obedient and the most slavish of the Warsaw Pact. And the Italian press often had crisis of identity. Is Italy the equivalent inside NATO? In other words, is it the most obedient and most cringing partner? Well, no, it's not Italy at all. It's France. France turns out to be the Bulgarians of NATO unless and until they vote against war. And if they do vote for war, quelle honte, right? Les adeptes de l'obéissance atlantique, les adeptes de la dénigration nationale. So that's a big problem for these French socialists. I hardly dare say this with a straight face. Okay, now let's look at some other countries. Britain, no. France, up in the air. Egypt says no. Foreign Minister Fahmy comes out, condemns the use of chemical weapons, condemns Assad if he did it, but no support for an armed attack. No. And indeed, there's a big fight going on in Egypt between the state newspaper Al-Ahram and Madame Patterson, the U.S. ambassador, still there. They accuse her of being in a conspiracy with the Muslim Brotherhood to destabilize the country. How about that? The United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. Now, Kerry, the bonesman, had called Ban Ki-moon, said, call off these inspectors. We don't care about these inspectors. To hell with your inspectors. We want to start bombing. Get them out of there. And Ban Ki-moon, amazingly, speaking from the Peace Palace in Den Haag, said, no, we're going to go through with this. So Ban Ki-moon demanded time for the inspectors. This was taken up by people in the British Parliament, and indeed, some of this delay is actually due to Ban Ki-moon. Amazing under these circumstances. Germany, it was Wednesday night when I began looking for possible defections, right? Always pay attention to countries that don't get in the American news. Germany, of course, is a big NATO partner in terms of military potential. And it turns out that a minister in the Merkel government, right, which is facing an election in about 1 month, Minister Niebel, I think he's the development minister, Niebel, Niebel, said, no, without a UN resolution, we will not take part. This means that the entire Bundeswehr and especially the Luftwaffe, the Bundesmarine, the Navy, so Air Force and Navy of Germany, not taking part. It's not quite as distant as Libya, but no military contribution. Italy, the Letta Bonino government says without a UN Security Council resolution, no Italian forces and no Italian bases for this aggression. That is also quite interesting. Spain, similarly, Spain says no, we're opting out. There are quite a few countries, by the way, that have it in their statute law that without a UN Security Council resolution, Chapter 7, use of force, they are not allowed constitutionally, legally, to take part. Austria, Chancellor Faymann of Austria says, it goes without saying that Austria will not contribute bases or forces, but he says Austria will not allow overflights. If you're coming from NATO bases in Northern Europe and you're going to the Middle East, Austria is a good place to fly over. Faymann says no. And that, of course, is the Austrian avocation. The OPEC headquarters is there. It really attempts to be a bridge to the Arab world in the same way that Norway has. We're still waiting, by the way, for Belgium, Netherlands, and Norway. Now, some people say, well, what does that amount to? That amounted to about half of the Air Force that was deployed against Libya. So that is significant. Canada! Oh, Canada! Harper says no. Canadian forces will play no role. This is a significant Navy and a significant Army, and it shows that the echelon block has broken up. This was actually even before the British. And Jordan, the king of Jordan, says no bases can be used. They're scared silly by this. And indeed, the king of Jordan was meeting with the Pope. The Pope is against war. I wish he'd be more explicit. But Pope Francis has said the only way out of this is dialogue. There must be a political solution. And he received the king and queen of Jordan in private audience in Rome. So you got it. Those are the countries. We'll go through the list one more time. But that's a big rejection front against aggression. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, in the midst of these confused alarms of war where ignorant armies clash by night, we do have some good news that the Tax Wall Street Party has succeeded in getting certified for the New York City mayoral ballot on November 5th. So it means that Randy Credico, running first as a Democrat in the Democratic primary on September 10th, go vote there. You'll also have a chance to vote for Credico and the Tax Wall Street Party on the general election ballot of November 5th. So let us go without further ado to Daniela Walls, who's been coordinating so much of this. Daniela, give us the big picture on the Credico campaign and the Tax Wall Street Party.
Oh, okay, well, right now, Randy's been at a lot of Syria anti-war protests. Because of Randy's roots as a civil rights, and important right now, his roots as an anti-war activist, he's finding himself in the middle of this mayoral campaign, having to do double duty. At the mayoral candidate forums, he's been blasting the other candidates for not speaking out about this intervention. Before and after the forums, he's been running out to the growing anti-war protests that are on the streets right now. Randy attended a large hands-off Syria rally yesterday in Times Square with Chris Reese from the United Front Against Austerity. Not surprisingly, no other mayoral candidates were seen at this event. Just based on last night's demonstration in New York City, the protests appear to be ballooning, and it's getting reminiscent of the beginning of the anti-Iraq war protests back in 2002. That's the word from New York City. And in any case, but Randy is the only authentic anti-war candidate in this September 10th Democratic primary.
Daniela, let me just stop you there. Can you tell us, do the other candidates say anything about this, or they try to avoid it, or what do they do?
They just have, so far, it's new in this, so far they've just been kind of laughing it off when he brings it up. But they were laughing off his other messages before, and now they're starting to adopt the things he said, and everything's moving more in a populist, progressive left direction. Like Christine Quinn just the other day adopted a $15 an hour minimum wage. So we'll see what they come out and say, but so far they've just been giggling. That I know of. So, but like I was saying, Randy is the peace candidate for mayor right now. I mean, Randy opposed the war in Vietnam in the 60s. He courageously traveled to war-torn Nicaragua in the 80s. Can you hear me, Webster?
Yeah, go ahead. You're doing fine.
He raised money. What? He traveled to Nicaragua in the 80s, where he raised money for indigent Nicaraguan children when the Sandinista government was under assault by the Contras. Your listeners might recall were covertly and illegally armed by the Reagan administration, resulting in the Iran-Contra scandal. And Randy was an early and outspoken critic of both the twin wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a lot of information about his anti-war activism in a documentary about his life that's on YouTube called 60 Spins Around the Sun. So if you YouTube the words Randy Credico 60 Spins Around the Sun, you'll find it. Randy and Chris spent most of their time at yesterday's demonstration confronting the pro-war Free Syrian Army folks who are clamoring for the U.S. To strike now. Randy and Chris were holding our huge banner that says, "Vote Credico, Tax Wall Street." The banner has a big photo of Randy's face on it, so the pro-war agitators could clearly see that Randy is running for mayor. I have video footage of Randy and Chris shouting at the small pro-war contingent, saying, "Go collect your paychecks from the CIA, you stooges." He yelled, "Why don't you guys go fight in Syria?" He kept repeating, "Go to Syria, go to Syria." He told them, Randy told them it was time to clock out, implying that the pro-war demonstrators were being paid for their presence at the demonstration. Who knows? He may be right, but in any event, Randy kept needling them the whole time, Webster, saying, "Time to clock out. They only wanted you here till 8 p.m. Time to clock out, boys." The pro-war folks had just one slogan the whole time that they repeated: "Free Syria. Bashar al-Assad is a terrorist." That's the only thing that they had in their limited repertoire. So we have some new spontaneous campaign slogans. A couple of them are, "If you support the war in Syria and then Iran, then de Blasio is your man." We also have, "If you want U.S. NATO imperialism to win, vote for Quinn." According to Chris, the anti-war protesters outnumbered yesterday the pro-war demonstrators by about 50-1. I saw the video. It looked like a lot more than that. It looked like about 8 of them were behind a barricade, but the pro-war folks were being protected by the bought and paid for NYPD who stood guard for them. Now that their unconstitutional stop and frisk has been significantly curtailed by Judge Shinlin, maybe they have time. Maybe the NYPD has a lot more time on its hands.
Daniela, before we go too much further, you gotta, for the people who want to join in, give us the contact info.
Okay. We are. Let me get all the information up. Okay, we are on the ballot for November 5th, like you said, for the general election with the Tax Wall Street Party. We made the ballot last week. Now we are transitioning to a campaign. We need all our money. We used up all our money during the petition process to get on the ballot. We just finished paying the lawyer who made sure everything was submitted perfectly. Our greatest need is still contributions. Whatever people can donate will be deeply appreciated and used to help us make flyers and banners and ads for the campaign. You can donate to credico2013.org/donate, or there is a donate button on the homepage of Randy's website at credico2013.org, credico2013.org. You can also donate to the Tax Wall Street Party. There's a donate button on that site at taxwallstreetparty.org, TaxWallStreetParty.org. And we don't have a lot of money, so we need as much grassroots volunteerism as possible. If you can volunteer, please contact me at taxwallstreetparty@gmail.com, and I'm going to keep a current list of what the campaign needs on the website at taxwallstreetparty.org. That's what I've got for donations and what we need right now, Webster.
Okay, so back to the report then.
Okay, well, do you remember the last thing I was saying? I was just, okay, sorry, I lost where I was. But, oh yeah, I was going to tell you that Randy is on his way to 125th Street and 7th Avenue right now for another similar Syria anti-war protest. he just left the mayoral forum on public libraries, co-sponsored by the Citizens Defending Libraries and the Committee to Save the New York Public Library. Both Citizens Defending Libraries is endorsing him, and the Committee to Save the New York Public Library, I think, are on their way. I still have to get the word on how it went, but they think his answers are the best.
And again, in these things, the important thing for our listeners is that Credico is going toe-to-toe with Wiener, with de Blasio, with Quinn, and the rest of these characters.
Right. In all of these forums, yes, he's on the stage with them. And it's getting pretty controversial because he is now he's starting to blast them about the war, but he's taking them on all these issues, and it's very funny. There's footage of this stuff that I posted to his website, but people should watch it because it's just funny to see them scamper. I'd like to do a whole report, Webster, on this library privatization and looting because it's a totally shocking scandal.
Quickly, we've only got this one segment.
No, I know. So I was going to say the more I learn about it, but today we're focused on Syria. So, but it's a real doozy. In any case, every major war we've gotten into has stymied economic progress here at home, and unlike his Democratic opponents, Randy understands exactly what war means, not only in terms of the kind of destruction and mayhem it visits on people, but also what it means in terms of our own domestic economy. It means austerity here at home. Nobody running for mayor understands this better than Randy. He thinks there shouldn't be any poverty in the richest city in the world. Were it not for the war in Vietnam, LBJ could have been one of our greatest presidents right up there with Lincoln and FDR, but LBJ reneged on his 1964 campaign promise not to send the boys to Vietnam. Johnson convinced himself that the American people in the United States
that's the idea. If you go for war, then your entire domestic reform agenda is out the window. LBJ shows it. Daniela, thank you. We'll see you next week. Well, actually, we'll see you Tuesday on another broadcast, and give us a report on that library intervention and the unfolding peace candidate in New York City.
Well, this is Resnick. Bye-bye, Webster.
And we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. World Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Remember, save the date, Tuesday, September 24th, in the evening here in Washington, D.C., commemoration of the arrival of the Russian fleets in New York, September 24th, 1863. San Francisco, October 12th, 1863. Later visits to Boston and Washington, D.C., the main international event of the U.S. Civil War that deterred the British and the French from attacking. They wanted to stab Lincoln in the back, but Tsar Alexander II prevented it. And this points to a bedrock of the modern world, which I'm afraid the degenerate ruling class and political class of today has forgotten. So let's just go through this rundown again, because I have the most complete one. I saw the Russia Today rundown. Mine is more complete. So we have the UN stalling, Ban Ki-moon not following orders from Skull and Bones Kerry on the inspectors. And the countries that have opted out to a greater or lesser extent are United Kingdom, Egypt, Germany, Italy, Spain, Austria, Jordan, Canada. Now, if you know more, go to Tarpley.net, Speakers Bureau page. There's a contact feature. Tell me about your country. Again, we're especially interested in the smaller NATO states like Belgium, Netherlands, Norway, and so forth. But a lot of these places are formally forbidden by their own domestic legislation from coming in when there's no UN resolution. And thanks again to Putin, and thanks also to the Chinese, there will be no such resolution. So this, as we pointed out at the beginning, is a broken-back imperialist coalition with no UN General Secretary, no UN Security Council, no Arab League, no legitimation through the local security organization, no U.S. Congress. There's a complete loser. Obama faces impeachment, not by us. We can't impeach anybody. But he will go down under the fascistic and reactionary Republicans, and this is not good for the United States. So we urge Obama, back off, be wise, follow your own instincts, which is to put yourself first. your vanity will not be saved by this attack, and instead the people who are committed to destroying Obama will be given a huge lift. Again, the timetable. The warmonger line, as we heard it last night, James Bays on the new Al Jazeera America. You can't get the international Al Jazeera anymore, not even on the Internet. So James Bays is on there saying that the new warmonger line, right after the British Parliament voted no to war, was that since the imperialist attack coalition is crumbling more and more with each passing hour, attack immediately. You'll never be stronger than you are now. Now, if they do that, right, suppose the French and indeed the British, right, because Cameron is a desperado capable of anything. Cameron could declare martial law. Remember, that's a more complete police state than just about anything in the world since the fall of the DDR. This is a threat to formal democracy in the West, right? Content democracy, substantive democracy is long gone, but we still have formal democracy. You could see a move to start the attack anyway without reference to anybody's parliament, with, God knows, all sorts of coups happening all over NATO in particular. Andrea Mitchell says the attack should come on Sunday. Hollande says as early as Wednesday. Let me just point out there's one consideration. The new moon, right? The cowards like to come out and attack when they can't be seen, and that's when there's no moon. So the new moon is Thursday, September 5th. So in the night between the 4th and the 5th would fill the bill in terms of having those cruise missiles and possibly stealth bombers not be visible. But as we'll see, it's not so easy now with Syria. By the way, there are demonstrations. One group that is doing yeoman service is the Answer Coalition. Check them. Go to the Answer Coalition web pages. They have, especially in the coastal areas, California, and here in the East, there is a demonstration at the White House noon Saturday, just as this program is going on the air. Above all, follow my Twitter feed. You can find it all there. So right now, it's U.S., France, Turkey, the Neo-Ottomans, and the Vichy of France. We're waiting for the U.S. intelligence report. Remember the British one, made up of old term papers. Remember they were caught and parodies were put out. Right, we could have succeeded in our fraud if it hadn't been for our bloody incompetent proofreaders. Anthony Cordesman of all the Strangeloves is the most out in front for war. He has no doubt. He's not a part of a party. He's just himself, right? So he wants to sell himself to the Pentagon. He says the conspiracy theorists all over the world are waiting to tear apart whatever Obama puts out as a pretext for war. Yeah, right. So this, again, conspiracy theorist simply means anybody who thinks independently and doesn't swallow the line. Now, this will be illegal if it happens. Let's just look at this. We were told on the last weekend that the Kosovo model was being studied as the basis for the attack. Kosovo model does not work. In those days, you had the drunken fool Yeltsin. Now you have Putin. No comparison. In those days, you were attacking Iraq, turned out to be defenseless. Syria, as far as we can see, not defenseless. The American people in those days, relatively untouched, beyond a latent Vietnam syndrome. Today, American people, sick of war, fewer than 10%, want to do anything to help the death squads in Syria. And the Republicans, having learned their lesson of 1999, Republicans waiting until after the attack, until Obama poisons his own well of support, to coin a phrase. They'll attack him. They'll start impeaching after the attack. So that's the overview in that department. Now, let's just look a little bit more at this illegality. The only way you can launch a legal military action in the current world, under the existing institutional arrangements, whatever you may think of them, is by way of a vote in the UN Security Council. The administration says, well, there are chemical weapons involved. This violates the Chemical Weapons Treaty of 1925 and the more recent Chemical Weapons Convention. Therefore, we can attack directly. Sorry, only the UN Security Council can make that decision. In other words, there are no self-appointed world gendarme. There's no self-appointed world sheriff under this system. You can't simply short-circuit it and say we're going to attack because we know who did it. The UN Security Council has to decide who did it. And the responsibility to protect, R2P, RTP, R2P. This is the heritage of Doctors Without Borders. We noticed Doctors Without Borders getting involved in accusing Assad. How interesting. That was Kouchner. He wrote it all the way to the French Foreign Ministry, and he was a humanitarian interventionist. That's our loopy friend, Samantha Power, Mrs. Cass Sunstein. These characters, they want American poor whites from Appalachia, black and Hispanic ghetto victims to die, quite frankly. They don't care about them. But the responsibility to protect is not international law. Therefore, the administration says we're falling back on international norms. We're falling back on international customary law. No. There's only the UN Charter. These other things have not found their way into the UN Charter. And again, one of the problems is that the Security Council in the Libya and Ivory Coast resolutions has probably voted things that are themselves in violation of the Charter. There would need to be a judicial authority for judicial review that could declare those in violation of the Charter and therefore illegal, null, and void. But nobody's going to be fooled by this chop logic stuff. Whether it's chemical weapons, you got to prove who did it. Responsibility to protect who died and left you as the enforcer. So all slender reeds for the aggressors to lean on. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now let's look a little bit at the personality, the cast of this tragic event. I would stress one of the reasons things have got this far is the people who thought that the main issue of the summer of 2013 was their little privacy and that they had to come out and be groupies for Snowden or others, whistleblowers and so forth, right? They found themselves in the middle of psyops run by the intelligence community. The big issue for the summer of 2013 is war or peace, world war or peace, and therefore the attacks have to go against the warmongers. And let's talk a little bit about these warmongers, right? If you're attacking the NSA, that's fine, but are you letting the Viper Rice or Bones Kerry off the hook? And the fact was, yeah, they were. Nobody was out there, with very few exceptions, attacking Kerry for having tried to start the war on his own on the afternoon of June 12th. Now, let's look at Bones Kerry. Bones Kerry, obviously the biggest aggressor. It was his tirade, his psychotic episode on Monday afternoon that it's an obscenity. Hey, Kerry, I know where you learned obscenity. That was a great word in the Vietnam era. And obscenity applies to U.S. aggression against developing sector countries. Now, there's a whole argument about Kerry flipping from war criminal to anti-war hippie protester when he found that the public opinion had changed and had turned against the war. He had to reinvent himself after some pretty heavy-duty war crimes. We'll be looking into that. Kerry, the Ribbentrop of the situation, if you want. My advice, don't put him in the driver's seat. And I'm speaking from almost personal experience. In the summer, I believe, of 1965, or in that middle 60s range, Kerry was driving in his sports car in Brittany, France, and his driving, like the Great Gatsby, he was such a careless and reckless driver that he got himself into a big automobile crash and spent several weeks in the hospital. He was at death's door. This is way before Vietnam. And the reason I know this is that a passenger in the car, I think the passenger on the passenger side, was one of my friends from high school who had made the terrible mistake of going to Yale. So that's Skull and Bones Kerry. We'll try to bring you up to date on that also. Kerry should be impeached. Kerry should be fired. If Kerry has led Obama into this situation, as I've said before, no British, no UN, no Arab League, no Congress, no nothing, he should be fired. The president has to save himself. Any president would have the sense to do that. And then we have Susan Rice, a.k.a. the Viper, as I put out on Twitter, only partly tongue-in-cheek. Her loathsome personality is actually a factor for peace. She's a factor for peace because she is so abrasive. She antagonizes everybody, and this breaks up the coalition. And all that stuff you hear when it says White House official, senior U.S. official, that, believe me, that's her. When she says, it's too late for the inspectors, too little too late, Assad is guilty, and we know it. Then we have the loopy Samantha Power. Mrs. Cass Sunstein, her instability, her dilettantish approach also generates a backlash. Remember, this is cognitive infiltration. She's the expert in cognitive infiltration along with her husband. Then we have the pathetic James Clapper, the intelligence czar, Jimmy Liar, right, the guy who went before a congressional committee and had to be informed that something big was going on out there in the world. He didn't know about it. He forgot to check his BlackBerry. Brennan, the head of the CIA, rendition and torture were his specialties back in the Iraq-Afghanistan war eras, but he was able to glom on to Obama. And then Hagel, the Sequoia candidate. Remember, without the fact that his family owned the Sequoia voting machines, he could hardly have been elected the senator from Nebraska. And then we have these two unfortunate ladies, Psaki and Harf. I won't go through what these rhyme with, but Psaki and Harf at the State Department, two unfortunate examples. Now, let's also look a little bit at U.S. public opinion. Anti-war. On the O'Reilly Show, Wednesday night, this was a sign of the times, we had Colonel Hunt, usually a warmonger, Colonel Ralph Peters, warmonger. Both of them are against this. They say, stay out, don't help Al-Qaeda. Then we had General Keane come on. General Keane is a darling of the neocons. He works with the Kagan clique at the American Enterprise Institute. General Keane says there are 20 airfields, only 6 are primary. Destroy the 6 airfields, you've basically crippled Assad's Air Force. Then he says the jihadis, the takfiris, the crazies, are concentrated in the north. They don't want to fight. They don't come up against the Syrian army. They focus on imposing Sharia law and cutting off heads and arms and legs and whatever else in the Aleppo region of northern Syria. Interesting that Hannity, of all people, made General Keane look like a kook with these arguments. The New York Times wants to cover its posteriors after Iraq, after Judith Miller. They say, no, we need to know more. Combs on Hannity, right, says, or O'Reilly, he's totally disappointed with Obama. MSNBC, there are notes of anti-war coming from people like Chris Hayes, from Rachel Maddow. Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth, who ran as a warmonger Dem in 2006. She lost both of her legs in Iraq. She's now against the attack. Zbigniew Brzezinski says this is not the time for a foolhardy, bellicose response. Donald Rumsfeld is against the attack. It's not well prepared. William Cohen, another former Pentagon boss, says no. In the neocon ranks, we've got Elliot Cohen says, go big or go home. He says, forget about surgical. There are going to be a lot of civilians killed. Deal with it. Bolton says, and this attack by Obama is worse than nothing, so he's actually preparing the impeachment indictment, right? The bill of impeachment is being prepared by Bolton. Krauthammer today in the Washington Post, similarly, basically go big or go home. Obama's concerned about his own vanity and his own reputation. A tomahawk is not the way to send a message. Send him a text message or send him a tweet. So a lot of even neocons are saying this is going to be too little, too late, half-hearted, and what have you. Buchanan is also against the attack. So a lot of reactionaries. In other words, it's the left, it's the Barbara Lees and others, right, DeFazio, other signatories to that 54 House Democrats, largely leftists, and the combination of traditional conservatives, reactionaries, and neocons. So Obama in very big trouble on the public opinion front. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. A couple of other interesting atmospherics. The Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda terrorist death squad killers, can't believe the U.S. is as feckless as seems to be the case under Obama, Rice, Hagel, and Kerry, and these other people that we've just described. The Nusra Brigade is for sure certain that they will be targeted by cruise missile strikes, so they are dispersing their resources in anticipation of a U.S. attack on them. They can't believe it. They're afraid. They say, we've been branded as terrorists, and they are. Therefore, the U.S. will attack us. Let's also look a little bit further into the military. Is the U.S. military on the verge of a large-scale mutiny after 12 to 13 years of futile, pointless warfare, right? The example of Iraq, the bombs going off in Iraq every day show how pointless this has been, and what's happening in Afghanistan equally, and the idea that you're now going to intervene to create the biggest al-Qaeda sanctuary of them all on the banks of the Mediterranean. So here we have interesting article, the Washington Post of today. There's growing skepticism in the U.S. military about the strategy and impact. U.S. forces have serious reservations. Let's look into it. One of them says the White House has no coherent strategy. Another one says there's a broad naivete in the political class about America's obligations and foreign policy issues, a scary simplicity about the effects that U.S. military power can achieve. This comes from a Lieutenant General Newbold, who was the operations director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the run-up to the Iraq War. A Marine Lieutenant Colonel, now think tanker, says this has potentially devastating consequences, including a fresh round of chemical weapons attacks and the military response by Israel. If Assad absorbs the blow and then counterattacks, what does the U.S. do? National Security Council here in the Rice gang says they won't tell you what their internal deliberations are, but other military commentators, a young Army officer says everybody was very surprised by this. It was a complete turnaround, and it's very dangerous. I can't believe the president is even considering it, says this Army officer who doesn't want to be named. We've been fighting. This is a really important point. This Army officer says, we have been fighting a counterinsurgency war, anti-guerrilla, in the past 10 years. Syria has modern weaponry. The U.S. Army would have to retrain for a conventional war, Warsaw Pact stuff, tanks, artillery, infantry, air, gas, God knows what else. Highly, highly interesting. Would have to retrain for a conventional war. What else do we see? Remember, Obama promised international partners in the original statement about 10 days ago that the U.S. would only act with strong support from the international community. Lots of other countries would have to step up and bear their burden. They're not there anymore, but Obama presses ahead, advised by the Bonesman and the Viper. Monster Mattis, the Central Command, is now a dove. We have no moral implication to do the impossible in Syria. It will be a full-throated, very, very serious war. Retaliatory strikes by Hezbollah loom and so forth. Anyway, take a look at this article, Military Skepticism, and the terrorists can't believe the U.S. is that feckless, but it is. All right, now let's look at our own scenarios. Let me just also point out, though, if the British drop out, the French cannot act. We learned this during Libya, that the British and the French have so merged their low-budget military establishments that they don't duplicate equipment. So part of the set of things you need to attack comes from the British. Another part of the set comes from the French. Very, very hard for either one to act without the other, right? You can't have one, you can't have none, you can't have one without the other. So that's the story there. So the French come in, that's going to be a flag. That's not going to be the real thing. So the U.S. and Turkey are now left. Turkey has a big army, but well, so does Syria, and so does Iran, and there are others. All right, now what's the story? What has to be stressed? Remember that Syria is the first step. What's behind this is Iran, the desire of Netanyahu and others to attack Iran before they claim the nuclear threshold has been passed. Syria was always the first step. You attack Syria to weaken and destroy Hezbollah, and you attack and destroy Hezbollah in order to isolate Iran. After Iran, well, then it's time for China and or Russia in some order, right? These people never learn anything. The United States now has 5 destroyers close by, submarines close by. Some NATO ships are also close by. Further out, 2 carriers in the Gulf. Notice there's reticence to put the carriers close to the Syrian coast between Syria and Cyprus, because this is the land of the Yakhont, Yachont, the Yakhont missiles. Those are carrier killers. They were designed to sink an aircraft carrier. And in a cage match between Tomahawk and Yakhont, I would go with Yakhont. The difference is Tomahawk is much smaller, much longer range, 1,000 miles maybe, very accurate but small. The S-300 anti-aircraft system of the Syrians deserves respect. And remember, Obama is promising us a cakewalk, just like Edelman back 10 years ago. Remember? We're told that it's going to be a shot across the bows of Assad. It's going to be a tailored operation. He thinks you can start it and stop it when you want, but it doesn't work that way. You start a war, it ends when the other side says it's over, not you. As von Clausewitz says, your attack is directed against an animate object, a living thing that reacts against you, and it can react with escalation. It can react with protracted warfare, ways that you find extremely uncomfortable. There is the RAF base at Akrotiri, Cyprus. This is well within range of a Yakhont. The British RAF has transferred Typhoon fighters there. Right now they're sitting there as sitting ducks unless Cameron uses Crown prerogative and attacks anyway, leading to the fall of his government, maybe to martial law and open dictatorship in Britain. Incirlik Air Force Base, right, the royal road for the terrorists coming into northern Syria, that's also within range of a Scud or a Yakhont from inside Syria. The Jordanians say they don't want their bases used. They may be simply brushed aside, overruled. The carriers on the scene, the Truman and its battle group, the Nimitz and its battle group, those are off, though, in the Gulf, although the Gulf could get pretty hot. Let's look at some of those scenarios. The most obvious, the U.S. attacks Syria. Hezbollah and Iran begin rocketing Israel. And since the rocket attacks come from 2 directions, they overwhelm the Iron Dome. They crater and incapacitate, interdict the IDF airfields. At that point, the entire Israeli military machine is brought to a halt, except for the atomic missile submarine. So at that point, the Israelis would have to go nuclear against Damascus, Tehran, and so forth. That looks like World War III. Russia, China would be hard-pressed not to somehow be dragged into that. And if at some point Israel is losing, how about Egypt? Won't the Egyptian military dump the Camp David Treaty and join in attacking Israel for their own purposes? That would empower possibly the existing government in Egypt or a coup against them if they hesitate. And this, I don't think we want to see this. Israel overwhelmed and smothered by missiles. Back in a minute on World Crisis. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So remember von Clausewitz, the war, once you start it, doesn't end when you want. It ends when the other side wants. Ask, as one commentator pointed out, ask Prime Minister Tojo and Admiral Yamamoto. You start a war, it ends when the other side is finished, not you. And that is what Obama... as we heard in the 2008 campaign, Obama would not know the difference between an RPG and a bong, and his military judgment. And then imagine, advised by the Viper and by Kerry and by Sequoia and by Jimmy Liar and by Loopy Samantha, Mrs. Cass Sunstein, expert in cognitive infiltration, but maybe not so good at Middle East war. So again, Hezbollah, Iran rocket the Israelis, overwhelm, smother the Iron Dome defenses, Israeli airfields are smashed. What's left? Go nuclear. Tehran, Damascus turn into howling nuclear craters. If Israel is losing, what's the effect on the Egyptian officer corps? Won't they say, here's our chance, let's dump this Camp David nonsense? The hatred against the U.S. is at the height. Get rid of Ambassador Patterson. A coup is possible there. Then there's cyber warfare, right? We have to remember there's this thing called the Syrian Electronic Army, and they seem, on balance, to be quite formidable. What can they do? I don't want to find out what they can do. I don't want to see any of this stuff. I'm strictly against every scenario that I've just said. It should not happen. There is no U.S. national interest. It is unconstitutional. It is a violation of international law. But above all, it's not expedient. It's worse than a crime. It's a mistake. Now, the other question, of course, is why? What is? We forgot. Iran could close Hormuz, right? The entire Persian Gulf, Iranian Gulf War, Gulf could turn into a huge boiling cauldron of war. And which way would Iraq go? All these interesting questions. Again, I hope we don't have to be confronted with answers, because that's a world conflagration. Why now? Do they believe their own propaganda? I don't know. How can they? One possibility, that Kerry and Rice, in particular, have been freaked out by the fact that the U.S. has zero influence in a country like Egypt, and the fear would be that the entire U.S. position, the post-1956 position in the Middle East, is about to collapse. And therefore, what occurs to them, since there's no possibility of positive diplomacy, there's no economic development agenda, all they can think of is bombing, right? This degenerate ruling class. They don't think of something like, let's try a Marshall Plan for the war-torn countries of the Middle East. It would never occur to them, right? They've been completely sucked into the logic of speculation, derivatives, usury, and the rest. Second possibility, new blackmail dossiers against Obama. God knows, we have all kinds of things you can find on the Internet about Obama's nighttime and recreational activities. Perhaps some of these have been photographed, assembled in dossiers, what have you. It also may be the case that the Saudis have put an ultimatum. They want this thing in Syria over. They want it over now. Otherwise, they'll dump the dollar. They'll do God knows what. All of these can go together. In other words, then none of them is really mutually exclusive. So the other one, of course, is that there was a con job at the root of all this, right? Was Obama leading from behind, was the buck-passing scenario. In other words, he wanted Sarkozy to take the risk with Libya, and he wanted Hollande and Cameron to take all the main risks with Syria, and the U.S. would be leading from behind, at least in terms of the public perceptions. Now what you have, of course, is Obama was quiescent, at least as far as we can see. The main freakout came from Fabius Hollande and then from Cameron Haig, again, since they have to act together. And now we're in the situation where the British have dropped out. The French may drop out. That would be the end of Hollande, but he's expendable. And then the U.S. would be there alone with Turkey. And Turkey, of course, is expendable. So a lot of this could very well be London and Paris circles above and behind those governments conning Obama, given his vanity, given his concern about his image. There could be people in the White House. I'd like to know what Valerie Jarrett is telling Obama. Is Valerie Jarrett telling him, don't do it? Or is she saying, go ahead and do it, and you will be the beneficiary of the rally round effect, and you will be then able to get your budget through, right? Because the other thing, of course, that's going on in the background is that the talks on the budget between Obama and the Republicans have now completely broken down, and we're headed towards a government shutdown on October 1st and the default of the United States sometime during October, according to Treasury Secretary Lude. And remember, the 14th Amendment would give Obama the power to simply say, sorry, we pay our bills, too bad. But, of course, his cowardice makes this less possible. Now, remember, the Martin Luther King anniversary, we had it this past week. I was down there myself on Saturday for the big demonstrations at the Lincoln Memorial. Remember Martin Luther King's ideas that civil rights, anti-war, and labor had to go together. And, of course, the labor part and the anti-war part have been completely absent from these commemorations. In line with our strategy, turn the imperialist war into a revolutionary mass strike for peace. Peace, no austerity through the Wall Street sales tax, and 30 million jobs by seizing the Fed. Peace, spread land. Peace, no austerity through a Wall Street sales tax, and land, in effect, the jobs, 30 million jobs through the seizure of the Fed. That's the program. The fast food workers, the SEIU, this is now spread to about 20 cities. The mass strike upsurge could loom. This is with war or without war. And given this mood that we've had, mutinies in the U.S. military, like the mass strike of the German sailors of late 1918, that's where the German Revolution of 1918 got started. So all of this is on the agenda. Don't listen to fakers like Little Weasel Rand Paul. He was confronted with Biden in 2007. Biden at least gave a good rhetorical performance. Biden said, if Bush attacks Iran without congressional approval, I will lead an effort to impeach him. Categorical. Little Rand is nowhere near that specific. Little Rand has made a deal with William Crystal of the Weekly Standard. And, of course, he may soon be outdistanced by other lunatics, even more unstable than himself, like Cruz or somebody else. So you don't want to be part of that. They're going to do what they're going to do. The benefits, well, there may be positive effects there. Of course, when it comes to these questions of economic survival, they're all negative. So you don't want to get too close to those reactionary Republicans. Let's see what they do. Therefore, the last point is these are now the circumstances in which typically the imperialists have recourse to the outside event, the false flag attack, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. All of this now possibly on the agenda. Let your maxim be that any false flag event, any terrorist attack, or any military clash that occurs, and the mass media try to blame it on Syria, no, you must assume a priori that this is being done by the CIA, by NATO intelligence, by Western forces. And let's just mention one last thing here. There will be a 9/11 commemoration, an event here in Crystal City, I believe, near Washington, D.C. That's going to be on Saturday, September 14th, and Sunday, September 15th. It actually begins on Friday the 13th, September 13th, 14th, 15th. You can save the date on that conference here near Washington, D.C., 9/11 and related issues, and it looks like that would be a chance to hear yours truly once again. And remember, the September 24th, the Russian fleet here in Washington, D.C. We'll tell you where and when in just a little while. So mobilize. There's a fighting chance to stop this war. Get out there, make it happen. Mobilize for peace. Stop the war. Turn it into a revolutionary mass strike for labor. And remember, the Credico attacks Wall Street Party in New York City.